Okay, well today we're going to be doing some more advanced VAN activities. The main things we're going to cover are some additional work around creating lists and to show you some more advanced ways you can create lists that use the information you've been collecting through your canvassing and phone banking and data entry, which we covered in the previous training. And we're also going to cover adding new registered voters into the system and being able to keep track of them. And then we're going to finish up with a little bit of looking at reviewing your work using the Canvas results and the survey question summary that you can use to easily create reports. Before I want to get started, I wanted to point out, if you'll notice here on the left-hand side of the screen, the support requests. You'll see that you can always use that, clicking on that to contact the admin. You just click there and you click Add New Support Request, or from the main menu you can also click Contact the Admin, and those will send questions to myself or to other support staff who will be able to help you answer those questions. So that's the first thing always to remember, is if you need help as you're doing something, contact the admin or support requests. And then we can start those conversations and get you the help you need. So on the creating lists, last time we talked a lot about on the create a list page, using the location information to be able to search by precinct or by city or by state house or state senate. We talked a lot about using voting history to narrow down a target universe, or you could include people who only voted in the 2008 or 2006 election in order to be able to contact those people. Today I wanted to focus a lot more on using the Create a List page to follow up on work that you've already done. As you've been creating lists and printing them out and then entering that data back in, that's actually adding on to the database. That's adding more information about people in the area that you're going to want to follow up on. The most common thing would be you've been doing, going door to door, and you've encountered a bunch of people who are not home, and now you want to go back to those same households and knock on those doors. And so a lot of that work on the Create a List page happens here in this section at the bottom called Canvas Status. And in here you have a bunch of options to include different results that you've collected. So, you can have a list where you're going to only include people that you've contacted where the results has been not home or left message, or any number or combination, one or many of these different things. You can also narrow things down to the kinds of contacts you've done, like maybe you only want to search for contacts that were collected through walking or through phone calling, or you can even narrow it down to contacts that were only collected by certain people. You see here we have a few options. These are the various users that are available on this committee, but as you added different users onto your site and those users were using their accounts to enter in new data, you could then come back and search for, say, all the information that Dan had entered in over the last month. The other options you have are you can search for the dates that they were canvassed. So, for example, if you only wanted to get people that were canvassed in the first half of July, you could do that by entering in those two date ranges in the box. And let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to just search for people that were not home or left message on that list. And so I'm going to hit search, and I'm not going to come up with anybody. So we're going to go back and add more people to see if we can collect that. So going back to the Canvas status, I'm just going to include everyone who was canvassed, let's just say in July. So I choose the date from July 1st going forward and include anybody that had any of these Canvas results. I'm going to hit search, and I'll get my list of people. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, there's a bunch of reasons, and let's just go ahead and click into someone's record to talk about that. So remember, from the My List page, which is where we are now, you have a lot of options here where you can save that search or list, which we talked about last time. You can print it out to print out reports for canvassing or phone banking. And those are the two main things we talked about last time. Or you can, send out emails to the group or letters. But I think the main things you're going to be doing are printing out reports for canvassing or phone banking, or saving them in your folders to be reused later. But back to the question of why it's important to be able to keep track of your Canvas status. And so to do that, let's just go ahead and click on somebody's name and we'll look at their record. So I've clicked on one of the people on my list, Christopher Amel, and if I go down here and I look at his contact history, I can see the results of information that was collected about that person. So you can see the dates here, when it was they were actually canvassed, who entered the data about them, what kind of canvas it was a walking, and what the result was. So, that might be important if, for example, you want to go back and talk to all the people where you had left literature, maybe was the result, within a certain day, because you've maybe dropped lit one week and then you want to go back and talk to those same people the next week to follow up to see if they had read the piece of literature that you had sent. So you can really think of this as this is your way of keeping track of your conversations with people over time. And as you can see, you can record multiple results. If you had been able to contact this particular person, you would also see the results of the survey questions and activist codes that you had asked them as part of your script. So let's just go back to my list. The other kind of thing I wanted to point out here was another way of building lists off the Create a List page. So we just went through how to create a list using certain conditions on the Canvas status. And once you do that, once you build your list of criteria, and that could be anything like we talked about last time with voting or by location, you can then use this other tool, the Cut Turf tool, to actually divide up groups of people into smaller walking areas for your canvassing. And maybe we should just start at the beginning and go through the whole process. So I'm going to go back to the main menu, and let's just say we're starting from that you want to create a list of people to canvass as part of your contact universe. So we're going to do location, and we'll just say let's do it in the city of Boston. And let's just pick that it's a couple of precincts. Let's just say you're only really active in Ward 1, Precinct 1, and Ward 1, Precinct 2. So I go and I click those two precincts. Then I hit Save. And we want to get, we want to talk to people who voted in the 2008 and 2006 elections. And we also want to make sure we're talking to people who did not vote in the 2009 municipal election. We'll just assume that those voters vote regularly and wouldn't need to be contacted for the governor's race. But this is just a simple beginning. So we'll hit search. And it's going to pull up a whole bunch of people. So now we have a bigger list, and let's say now we also want to use this search as our list of people that we're going to be going back to again and again. So here's where you can set up a multi-step search that you can use over and over again that includes the information that you've been collecting through your Canvas status. So if you remember, we just set up our step 1 of Canvas of these two precincts and this voting history, and now we want to set it up so that this search will remove people that we talk to who we wouldn't want to talk to again. So we're going to add a second step to our search here by hitting the Remove People button, and we're going to go down to that Canvas status page section that we were talking about before, And we're going to include, as part of the people that we want to remove, people that have been marked deceased, people that have been marked inaccessible, meaning we couldn't get to that house, or that, let's say, refused, right? The most common one where you wouldn't want to go back. Those are the people that were angry or belligerent, that you came and talked with them and you don't want to go back and talk to them again. So we'll include any of those. And we're not going to set any conditions here, because what we want to do is every time we run this search, we want to make sure to exclude those people out of our search that have the Canvas result. And so then this way, and it's probably not going to actually remove anybody here, but in this way you've now set up a search that you can use over and over again to go back to the same doors. And as you're finding doors where you can't actually talk to the person, or they've moved, or they've died, or they don't want to talk to you again, you're automatically removing those as your search. So now it would be good practice to save this search, and let's just call it, remember, saved searches are dynamic, meaning they happen every time you run it. It uses the same criteria. And we'll just call this, we'll put this in a new folder and just call it Ward 1 and 2 Canvas group, or Ward 1 Precinct 1 and 2 Canvas group. And we're just telling it that this search excludes, the refused, deceased, and inaccessible. And I hit save. And you now see we've got our saved list and we've got our 2 steps. And now let's go another step that you can use with that search. And so I'm going to go back to the main menu. Let's say you've built that universe on day 1, and now it's a few days later, and you want to divide up that big group of 1,000 or more doors into smaller, more bite-sized pieces to actually canvas, to walk. So I'm back to the main menu. I'm going to go to look in my folders, and I'm going to click on my Ward 1, Precincts 1 and 2 Canvas groups, and I've got my search, and I'm just going to click on the name and reload that search. And it's going to rerun that search, and you can, again, every time you do that, it's going to pull up all the criteria that we selected. So as you're canvassing and actually finding doors that are inaccessible or refused, it'll be now excluding them from that search. So now we've got our big group, 1,200 doors, and we're going to cut that up and make it smaller bite-sized pieces. So there's a lot of ways you could do that. You could narrow it down using street names or zip codes. But another nice tool that you might want to use is the turf cutter here. And so you see that from the My List page. You just click on the Cut Turf. And what this is actually going to do is pull up a map of all of the doors that you had that are in your search. And now we can actually use it just like Google Maps to pan around or zoom in. And we can actually draw boxes around neighborhoods to actually create turfs. So the way you do that is, first there's these 2 drop-down menus, and the lower one is where you're telling the system which turf you're actually going to draw. So right now I'm going to draw turf 1, and so you just select turf 1 there from the drop-down menu, and then you start to click on the screen around the edges of the turf that you want to draw, and you'll see that it's highlighting doors in yellow, and you'll see here it's actually telling you how many doors you've selected, so you can get a sense of the size of your turf. So, maybe this turf's actually a little too big, so you can also do undo last click, and that'll just kind of take you back to where you were before. So I'm maybe going to...
Question, Garrett?
Go ahead, Sarah.
So when you're cutting the turf, would this typically be used for like individual assignments then? Like you're cutting a turf for like one person or one group to go out and do door knocking?
Yeah, typically people use this as they would want to cut them up as, turf 1 would be the size that 1 or 2 people could canvas in a day. And so, or in the couple of hours that you're going to have them volunteering. So I think, for every group that's going to be a different size depending upon if they're canvassing for 2 hours or 3 hours. You could also take like what we're doing is cutting turf 1. You could make it bigger, 150 doors, and think of that as, well, that's what 2 people can do in a day. So I think for every group it's going to be a little different. So you just need to decide sort of what the size is. And as you can see here, maybe physically, how much space it is. Are there a lot of space between the doors, or are they all kind of every door on the street? Will depend upon how easy it will be to cover a lot of space.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So once you've kind of got the group that you've selected, you just come back and you click on the little start, the little S, and that will close that little polygon. And then you just tell it, using this top drop-down menu, which turf you're saving. So now I select turf 1, I hit save, and you now see that the color changes and I've got my turf 1 locked in. Now I can tell it to start cutting turf 2, and I just do the same procedure, just surrounding the dots, highlighting it by clicking on the screen, and then when I'm done I come back, and now I tell it to save turf 2. So you can go ahead and do that up to 30 turfs, and I'll just do maybe one more. And let's say turf 3 is actually just this little side of the street. And I tell it to save it as turf 3. And then you can even come back later and edit turf 1. Maybe turf 1 actually needs to be a little bigger. So the way you would do that is you come here to the bottom menu and you select turf 1 and you just hit clear, and it's going to undo what turf 1 was, and then you can just redraw it. Maybe make it a little bigger. So you can actually, and then once you're done, you come up here to the top button and you tell it to save turf 1, and it's back to being committed. So you can actually do that. You can assign all the doors into turfs, or you can only assign part of them. And once you're done, and let's say we're just cutting the 3 for now, you can come back and hit finish. And you'll see now, if I go back to that same folder I was working in before, you'll now see I have my search, and then I also have my individual turfs. So now what you can do is you can actually, if you go to View Map, you can actually come back, and once you click View Map, it'll take you back to that same screen where you can edit or add additional turfs once it's loaded. So you can actually, from that, be able to come back and edit things later, or going back to my folders and going back to that turf, you can actually just print out that region. When you print out region, what it will do is just like what we talked about last time, where you select your print format and the script that you're working on and the source and all, like we did on the others, it will now actually print. And always make sure to set up your page correctly, otherwise it's going to look really weird when you print it out. It will actually, first print the map for turf 1, and then once you print that, you can hit next, and then you can actually print out here turf 1, and then you hit next, and then you can print out the map for turf 2. You hit next, and you can print out turf 2, and so on. You can also, going back to viewing the folders and loading it, you can actually just load particular parts of that list. So maybe you only want to go to turf 3 this day. You can just click on that, and it'll load that list, and you could just treat it like we did other lists created before, where you print out the formats just like any other lists. So in this way, you can actually set up groups of doors that you can reuse over and over again throughout the campaign to go back and recontact them. Now, another thing to think about that I want to talk about with lists are, let's say you actually also want to phone bank this same neighborhood. So you want to go and create a list for phone banking, and you're picking the same location, Boston, Ward 1, Precinct 1 and 2, which I think is what we did before. And because we only want to do phone banking, we want to get all the people that are phones only. So that means all the people that have phones. The only people that are going to come up in our search are people that have phone numbers. And we're going to actually try to phone bank this whole list. But at the same time, we actually have people that are also walking some of those turfs. And we don't want to have people both calling and walking the same door at the same time. So another thing you can do is use the remove tool to actually remove people that are on some of your saved lists. So here I've got my list for phone banking, and I actually want to remove people and from those turfs that we had cut earlier. So I go to remove, and I go to my saved lists, and I can actually pull up the saved list that I had of the turfs that we cut before. So you see I've got all my saved lists here, and I see my different Canvas groups, and I've got turf 1, 2, and 3 that we had cut. So I'm actually going to remove turf 1, and then I hit search, and then I hit remove again, remove people, go down to my saved lists, and I'm going to remove turf 2. Those are the 2 that we are walking today. And you'll see my actual list of people has gotten smaller because it's been removing those folks that were in those 2 turfs. And so now I can use this to print out lists for phone banking, and I can be safe in the knowledge that it's not including people that were also being knocked. And you can also just use this also as a search. So you could save this as a search, just like we did on the other list, and it'll include that step of removing those other saved lists every time. So in this way, if you think about it, you can set it up so you are actually segmenting out all your different lists so things don't overlap by including that remove list tool. Is that clear, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to ask, so, I mean, chances are we'll probably have many saved lists then, right, to talk about all these different criterias then that we might want to exclude for different activities that we're doing?
That's right. Yeah, I think many groups would find that useful, that you set up a search that is, your phone banking search, and you have a search that is your walking search, and you want to make sure then to include the saved lists for each one. So from the calling search, you're removing all your walking folks, and from your walking folks, you're removing all your calling folks. So yeah, and the process would just be then to set up the search just like we did, where you've got your step 1, which is your criteria, right? Give me the people in the precinct and that meet the voting histories that we were interested in, and then you add additional steps, as you can see here. Step 2, remove people from this saved list. Step 3, remove people from this next saved list, and so on. So, it's going to vary which ones you're removing, but it's an option to think about as a way of segmenting out your lists for your different activities.
And can everybody at our organization use those saved lists, or is it just like myself when I make them?
Right. So we talked about this a little bit last time, but it's worth going over again. On the folders, if you go to View My Folders, you can actually share that folder and those lists that are inside of it with other people. So from the My Folders page, if you click on the name of the folder, and then you click here on Edit Folder, you'll see I have the option to share it with other people that are on my committee. So here in the list where it says Users Without Access, it'll have all the other user accounts on your committee, and you can just click them, and you click them over to Add, and now when those folks log in and they click on View My Folders, they'll actually be able to see that folder and pull those lists and use them just like they were their own. So in this way, and I'm just going to not actually give them access to it, but in this way, you could set up one person who gets really good at making lists for your organization, and they can actually make the list for everybody and share them with everybody across the organization, so that sort of one person is responsible for defining, the lists of folks that you're going to call or phone bank. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So we've covered some different ways you can use the Create a List page and save lists, and also how to use Turfcutter to create groups of voters that you can contact. So the other thing you're going to encounter during your work is people that are unregistered to vote that you are registering as part of your work. And the way, and really there's kind of two categories of unregistered people, the way I think about it. There are people that are unregistered who have never been registered in the state of Massachusetts before, and then there's probably going to be a lot more people that are that were registered but they live somewhere else, and so now they've moved and need to update their voting information so that they can vote. So the way we're dealing with this for the moment is we're actually putting newly registered people here in the other tab, the My Campaign tab. So what's going to happen is you're going out and you're collecting the records of the folks that were on your list. You're collecting the answers to the survey questions and activist codes. And then the folks that you encounter that weren't on your list who are unregistered, and you're filling out a voter registration form with them or giving it to them, you're going to then copy down the information from that voter reg form, and we're going to put it here in My Campaign so you can keep track of it. And the way to do that would be, so from My Campaign, you do quick lookup to first check and see if they're already in your system. So let's just search for myself. Anderson.
Could you remind me the difference between My Voters and My Campaign one more time?
Sure. So My Voters is gray, is the one way to see it. And My Voters is actually the voter file for the whole state of Massachusetts, as well as some records for people that have been identified as unregistered, mostly from the city census work that has happened, where cities, keep track of, have a resident list. So it's mostly registered voters and very few unregistered. My Campaign is the database where you kind of create it. Basically, it's going to be unregistered people that you are registering, and you're going to enter them in there so you can keep track of them. And you're also going to enter in volunteer or supporter information into My Campaign. So think of it this way. My Voters is the voter file, and My Campaign is the database that you're going to build through your work and your volunteers.
Got it. Thank you.
So when you've gone out and collected a voter registration card, first you're going to come over to My Campaign, and you're going to see if they're already in there. So I'm just going to search for myself, and you'll see I'm not already in My Campaign. Then I'm going to search the voter file to see maybe if that person was registered somewhere else. And you'll see that, and probably in most cases what you're actually going to need to search on is probably by city, or maybe by the city that they used to be registered at. So in this case, I'm searching for myself, and let's say I've actually moved, this is me, right, registered in Cambridge, but let's say I've actually moved in to Boston. So what you could do then is you just take that record, you click it, and you're actually going to copy that person over from the voter file to My Campaign. And what that's going to do is take a bunch of the information like date of birth and party and all the rest of it, and copy that over into My Campaign. But because, let's say, I've moved, you're going to want to update the address information. So what you would do is you would just click on addresses, and you'd click Mark Address Bad, because that's no longer where I am. And then you're going to add a new address. And let's say it's 123. Well, let's just say I'm now living at 41 West Street in Boston, 02111. And that's my new home where I am registered. You're going to see this little note sometimes. What this is it's checking that address against the post office. So the system is noticing that that address actually has a lot of apartments in there, and is asking if I register to that apartment. Sometimes it's going to say that it's not actually a recognized phone number or not a recognized address from the Postal Service. If this is the address that's going on to their voter registration form, this is the address you should put in, because this is the address where they live. And so once you've entered it in, you just click Finish. And you'll now see I've got my new home address marked into the system. So that's one version of of a new registration. Oh, and sorry, and the other things you're going to want to do is mark those new people that you've entered as new registrations. So what we've done is we've set up some activist codes here that are under the voter registration category, and we have two kinds. The change address, so those are people like myself who I just entered, where I used to live in Cambridge, but I've now moved to Boston and need to be registered at that new address, or people that are new entirely, that we're just calling new registration. And I'm going to go ahead and go through that, that process now. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete myself here. But yeah, so let's say, same procedure, you've collected a voter registration card, you go to Quick Lookup, you search for last name, and let's say it's Gary in Cambridge, and I hit search, don't show up. Oh. I search the voter file, and I can't find myself there already in the voter file, so I'm just going to click Add New Person. So this would be people that, you know, are not previously registered anywhere in Massachusetts, or they're just not in the voter file. You can't find them, in which case you're going to click Add New Person, and you're going to enter in the information from the voter registration card. So fortunately, it's you know, a lot of the fields here are the same that would be on the voter reg card. Just going to enter an address here, 2138, and, you know, a gender and a date of birth would be the sort of normal things that you would enter in. And you know, phone numbers or any other information you've collected, and then once you're done, you click Next. And what it's already going to do is going to check one more time, make sure you don't have any duplicates. Let's say it's not a duplicate. You just click Next, and I now have, it's going to review one more time. Am I adding the right stuff? And I click Finish, and now I'm here in the system. And just like the other person, you're going to add the activist code new registration to that person. And now you can come back later, and you can actually search for all the new people that you've registered or changed address in order to keep track of your list. And what I would suggest is you actually maybe build a script that is specific for the new people that you're registering as part of your work. And then during GOTV time, maybe you come back here to the main menu and you create a list based upon those activist codes. So you just go to Create a List, Activist Code, and you search for all the people that have those activist codes. And you hit Search, and you get a couple of people. I've been doing this training a couple of times now, so we have some duplicate people in here that I'll have to get rid of. But then you could then print out a list, a report for these new registration people that maybe includes a little more information about their polling place, or maybe the hours that polling locations are open in Massachusetts, you know, that sort of thing. So I would suggest and think that maybe that new registrations and change of address voters that you're encountering should be treated just with a little more attention to helping them through the process of voting than the folks that you're talking to on that are already registered voters and have voted before. And you know, you would be able to create scripts for them and survey questions and activist codes, just like we covered during the previous training. So that's kind of how you cover newly registered or change of address voters. Did you have any questions on that?
Just one. So we track them in My Campaign while they're newly registered. But at some point, do they end up in the My Voters file then?
That's right. So, and I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier. So we're actually updating the voter file periodically throughout the election. We'll go back to the Board of Elections and we'll get the new voter file. So, what should happen is, you put these people here in My Campaign as a sort of a temporary measure to keep track of them, but then they're going to show up here in the voter file come, when we do the new update. And what we're going to do here at MassVote centrally for the groups is actually create the lists of the people that are unmatched, that were marked as new voter reg in your My Campaign database, but have now not shown up in the voter file. And what you can do then with those folks is follow up with them individually and to see if maybe you had given them the voter registration form and they hadn't turned it in, or there had been a problem. So in that way, it's kind of like a check to make sure that the folks that you think you're registering are actually getting registered. And then if they aren't, then we can follow up with them to make sure that they can vote.
And do we keep them in My Campaign after we know that they've been registered, or should we be taking those activist codes off of them?
Right. So as the other part of the process is we're gonna match the ones that are already registered or that have now shown up in the voter file, and those that have been matched, we're going to take away those. We're going to take those activist codes off because they're now in the voter file, and they should be treated just like the regular voters that are showing up on your lists. It's only going to be the folks that aren't showing up then that you're going to want to follow up with. Otherwise, like let's say you're canvassing a street, right, over and over again, and if you've set up your searches to give you the people that are on that street, once the newly registered voters show up in the voter file, they are going to now appear on your searches that you've already created. So in that way, they kind of become integrated with your regular lists for GeoTV and that work.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So the last thing I wanted to cover today, I know we've gone through a lot, would be some ways you can actually review your work as you're sort of ongoing. And the big thing is here using the Canvas results group. And in this way, you can actually create reports of the work that you've been doing for reporting to funders or for your reports or other reasons. So there's two real tools that I would suggest using. The first is Canvassing Summary, and you just get that from the main menu. And you have a whole bunch of choices here about the date ranges that you're doing, you're reviewing. So let's just say we're going to review all the Canvas work that was done in July. And you actually have some choices here around how it's breaking it down by city or county or state house, state senate. I would suggest using county for this reason. I'm just going to hit refresh and pull up my list. When you do the GeoView of county, you can then click on the name of the county, and then it's actually going to break it out by precinct. And so this way you can get a sense of your work in the different neighborhoods where you're active. Another thing you might do, let's say you're active in 2 state house districts, you could do that GeoView, and you could see your work across the different state house districts. And you'll see here that it's broken out into the results of the various activities you've done, number of non-homes, number of refused or moved, and then the other one I would point out is the canvassed. And that is actually the canvassed is the way the system calls a successful contact. So canvassed is when you actually spoke to that voter and they answered a survey question or activist code. So you don't mark someone as canvassed. They get marked as canvassed automatically when you apply a survey question or activist code to their record. So I think of canvassed as sort of successful contacts. So that's one way of reviewing your work. The other way is using the survey question summary. So, you're going to be asking various survey questions about like will vote or different kinds of questions throughout the campaign. And you might want to just see, well, how are we doing? What are the results that we're getting? So I'm going to pull up an old survey question. I'm going to use the 2009 one. And I'm going to change the date range back to include way back to 2008, 2010. And I'm going to hit refresh. And I'm going to see some results here. And I can actually see it's broken down by the results of the question I was asking. So 93% of the people we asked the question to gave the answer of yes. Very few, only 6% gave the answer of no. And only 1% said maybe. And just like on the canvassing summary, you can also do things like breaking that down by precinct. So in this way, you can actually keep track of how you're doing. So once you set up your survey question that you're going to be asking throughout this election season, you can actually come back and check your work every so often and see how things are going.
I saw at the top of that last page, the export, is that it'll just take out the information that was displaying there?
That's right.
Like an Excel or something?
That's right. It'll actually, let's go, I'll do that for you so you can see that. It'll actually just take this table that I'm highlighting here and export that to Excel. And then you could use that to build charts or some other kind of fancy presentation that you wanted to put into a report for, grant funders or whatever. You could use, if you export it to Excel, it'll just take these cells and write it out in the same way. And then you can manipulate the numbers. The other thing I just wanted to cover briefly and we sort of touched on this earlier, is using My Campaign to track your volunteers. We talked a little bit about new registrations, but in the same way, you can actually add people to My Campaign individually or in bulk. And we showed you how to do it individually, where you just use the quick lookup tool, right, where you first search to see if they're in there. And if they're not, then you can search the voter file. This is going to pull up way too many. And you can actually search the voter file and copy over records into My Campaign. And once you've done that, and I'll just go to the people that we already have in here, you can actually add some stuff about their volunteer information. So, you might want to track what kinds of activities volunteers are willing to do, be it canvassing, phone calling, data entry, and if there's other activities that you're interested in, including submit a support request, let me know, and I can help you add additional activities that you want to track. And you can also do things like keeping track of availability that they have to volunteer. And then with that information, on the Create a List page, you can actually build lists of people based upon their volunteer interests. So you can do things like give me everyone who's interested in doing data entry or phone calling, or give me everyone who's available on these particular days, or you can just say something like include any active volunteer. And you hit search and you're going to get all the volunteers you have in your system. Now, many of the organizations, you might already have a list of volunteers or supporters. I'm just going to go ahead and clear these out while we're talking. In which case, on like a spreadsheet somewhere, let me know, and we can actually upload those for you to just kind of build out that whole list of volunteers that you already have. And in this way, you can then use that list for your phone banking and canvassing within Van. The other tool that I'll just briefly cover that involves volunteers is you might want to create events and schedule volunteers for those events. And you can do a lot of that work here on the View My Calendar, where you just get a little calendar here, and you see we have one little event already created. And I'm going to go ahead and create another event for today. I'll just click on, and so you just click on the day, and then you click on Add New Event, and you can give it a type, like is it office work, is it a phone bank? I'll just call this volunteer phone bank. Give it a name. Type all this in. A date, today. A time. You can also do things like shifts, like let's say on election day you're going to have 3 shifts of phone callers. You would just set the total time that your phone bank was going to be open, let's say noon to 8 p.m., 3 shifts, and then you can divide up those shifts. So one shift is noon to 2, and the next shift is 2 to 4, and so on. You can also set up reoccurring events. So you might have a weekly phone bank on Thursday nights. You could just set that up, and it would repeat and add to the calendar every time. Let's just say this is a one-time thing. So I say no, it's not repeating, and I click next. And you can also do things like set goals. So let's say it's a phone bank and you only have 6 phone lines. You can set the goal to recruit 6 volunteers for that phone bank, and then you will know when your sort of quota is filled up. Or you can just not set goals and just recruit as many people as you want for the activities that you're doing. So I said no, do not set goals. And then you can do things like, now I have my list set up. I can view volunteers that are already scheduled for it. And at this point we don't have anybody scheduled. Or going back to that event page, I can do things like find volunteers, which just takes me to the create a list page. And I can do things like search for all the volunteers that I might want to contact. So I have a very small list here. Nobody. I think I have somebody in the system in this database. So here's a person, and let's say I wanted to actually schedule them for that event. So I'm looking at their contact details page, and I can click on events, and I can schedule them for that event that we created. So I just select events from the drop-down. It's that volunteer phone bank, and they're attending that shift, and they've been scheduled. And so now they see them showing up for that event. Now going back to the main menu to look at that event itself, I look at my calendar, I click on the event, and I can view the volunteers that are scheduled. So in this way, you could schedule, the people that are for the event, or different people in your office can be scheduling volunteers, and you can see sort of how you're doing, how many people you have signed up, and then you, after the fact, let's say this person was scheduled, but they didn't actually show up. So the day of the event, they don't show up. You might want to keep track of that. And then in the future, you could search and make sure that people that consistently say they're going to come and then don't show up, you might not want to invite them to future events. So you could use this like an RSVP tracker or a scheduling tracker beforehand. So this is a good way to create events and then keep track of who's coming or who's scheduled to come. The other way people often keep track of events is using activist codes. And I think of this usually like, let's say you hold a rally or a big public event and you didn't really invite people individually, you just kind of put out a bunch of information, emails and literature and whatnot, and you just want to keep track of who came to that event. And the way I would usually recommend doing that is you can just create an activist code with an event type, and you can always do that here through the activist codes. And you add a new event code, and you just give it the activist code type of events, and then just give the activist code the name of the event and the information about it. And you can just tag people like we talked about last time with that activist code. And then in the future you could come back and you can create a list based upon that activist code for that event that you had tagged them with. So there's, you can really do it either way, but I think maybe using the events calendar is better for scheduling people ahead of time, and the activist codes is probably easier for keeping track of events where you're only keeping track of whether or not they came sort of after the fact. So that was a lot of information about events and volunteers scheduling, but I think, speaking generally, you can use My Campaign in a lot of ways to keep track of your volunteers, their availability, their interests, their work with you, whether they've come to previous events, whether they've been to phone banks before. So it's really kind of, there's a whole world there to use for your volunteer management. And maybe we should have another training just on volunteer management sometime in the future. But Sarah, did you have any questions while we're sort of quickly going through all that?
No, that all was made sense to me.
Great. So today we covered some of the advanced list creations and using the cut turf to create areas for walking or phone banking. We also talked a little bit about adding newly registered voters into the system, and we also talked about some of the using the View Canvas results to review your work, and we talked a little bit about volunteer management. And unless there's any other questions, the thing I wanted to leave you with was as you're going along and as you encounter issues or questions, this nifty contact the admin button sends in a support request, and we can work together to answer your specific question. Sarah, is there anything else you want to talk about? Or?
Nope, I think that's about it. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. Thank you.